So I've asked David Painter, head of the Clermont County Republicans, and Patty Lawrence, head of the Clermont County Democrats, to sit down with me either together or separately for an interview about what their vision is for Clermont County. Both of them have refused to do so. But enter Jen Mazzuckelli. Jen Mazzuckelli is a liberal Democrat, very different than me, totally opposite than me, but she agreed to sit down and we had what was effectively a fairly impromptu but far-flung discussion of local and national issues. It was about an hour and a half. Hopefully you enjoy listening to this discussion. So it is June 18th, and I'm sitting here with Jen Mazzuckelli, who just taught me how to say her name. And she ran as against David Painter, right? As for Clermont County Commissioner in the last election as a Democrat.
Correct.
And she offered, I don't believe that to this point, we'll see how this goes, but you and I, the only conversations we've ever had have been in commissioner meetings or around commissioner meetings, to my knowledge, and they usually end up with not us agreeing we're not going to talk to each other or something like that. You know, so we have very deep, I think, some differences that have come up in those meetings. And but I appreciate you agreeing to sit down with me and have an interview.
Yeah.
You've already told me you don't speak on behalf of the Democratic Party in Clermont County, although you were a candidate for the Democratic Party in Clermont County
ticket, but I did not speak.
as commissioner.
Yes.
And just for reference, I have asked Patty Lawrence, who is the chair of the Democratic Party, multiple times to do an interview, and she doesn't respond even. And I don't really get that. You know, it does. You know, and just before we jump in, just some editorial. We all know that Clermont County is a very red county, but it's getting more blue in the west, in the Union Townships, Miami Townships, Lovelands, etc. And you know, and I would think that Ms. Lawrence would want to, you know, talk about what's important to the Democrats in Clermont County that's relevant to the citizens. So I appreciate you talking to me. You haven't told me anything's off limits unless I have some deep personal question you're not going to answer, but
yes.
Maybe before we jump into stuff about government and what matters to citizens in Clermont County and how the government can better serve them, is there anything just about who you are, your background, that you want to share with people?
Sure. I grew up in central Illinois in a small town. My parents got divorced when I was young.
Okay.
So I grew up in Jacksonville, Illinois, which is about 30 minutes southwest of Springfield towards St. Louis.
Okay.
And moved here after my freshman year of high school. And I graduated from Glen Estee High School. Went to school my first year in Washington, D.C. And I graduated from Illinois College with a bachelor's degree in poli-sci, English. My area of interest was international stuff.
Okay.
And then I worked, because what do you do with an English major? Human resources. So I worked in human resources for a while.
I know somebody, edit tech manuals.
Right.
But now AI probably does that for us.
Probably. I don't know. But I mean,
so
who
you
knows
got,
with AI?
so you got, so you
I
graduated
got laid
from
off.
Glen Estee.
I worked at Anderson Windows, which was bought by Morgan Products Limited, and then well, it started out Adam Wholesalers.
Okay.
Then Morgan Products Limited, and then.
So how long have you been living? How long have you lived and been a voter in Clermont County?
Okay, since 2023, March of 2023.
Okay, so you came back. You grew up here to some degree.
Yes, I graduated from Glen Estee. Came back.
Okay, and I don't actually. I've been frequently accused. I used to be. You know, I'm very conservative.
What?
And you're shocked.
No way.
But I get accused because I'm normally a thorn in the side to the crony system in Clermont County.
Pester people.
I get accused of being a secret Democrat. All that kind of stuff is a routine.
It's probably because I shook your hand.
Yeah, I don't
and
know. I
turned
don't
you
think
a little
way
bit
before
blue.
that. Way before that.
Oh no.
But I don't know a lot about Democrats. I've never been in the contrary. I've never been in the Democratic office or whatever. I've never been to a Democratic meeting. Although I'm going to try to go to the next meeting just to see what happens if I try to go to it.
We have a secret handshake. They might not let you in.
You know, so I don't know a lot about Democrats, but on the one hand, but I might know more than most the average citizen does. But if you describe kind of what's your Democrat philosophy, you know, on the conservative side, you could have, you know, from Rand Paul to Mitt Romney claim that they're Republicans, and they're kind of in the same side of the page, but they're way different. So what's kind of your overriding Democrat philosophy?
Well, I would prefer to call it my overriding political philosophy.
Okay.
Because I believe that the majority of American citizens fall in the middle. Some are more center right, some are more center left. But if you look at a general statistical bell curve, most people are in the middle.
Now, do you consider yourself to be, for example, a democratic socialist?
I don't really like to put things in a box. I know what issues I believe in.
Okay.
You know, I also, like when I grew up, the way that the different parties were explained to me is Republicans are fiscally conservative and want small business, and Democrats are more pro-social issues.
Okay.
And so I believe in affordable housing, that people should be able to afford where they live, you know, but I also believe in balanced budgets. So I think a lot of people are like that, and we try to put each other in boxes, and that's where we get the division.
So to what degree, and I want to move on to more local stuff.
Yes.
Because you and I have had run-ins. I think that you're not a fan of Elon Musk. I'm a fan of Elon Musk. I'm a big fan of Doge. I don't think you're a fan of Doge based on the interaction we had So then when you say you believe in balanced budgets, to what degree at the federal level do you believe there's waste, fraud, and abuse within the federal spend? From a scale of high, medium, low, almost none.
Well, I haven't done an audit, so I can't speak specifically to that from my own personal experience. But based on the reporting I have read, there is very little fraud and waste in the government because over the years, they've worked to do that. There's a lot of inefficiencies that could be improved. The problem that I had with Doge is not that he wanted to make things more efficient. It's that he just went in with a wrecking ball and just demolished things without looking at and analyzing them critically to find out. And as a result, I'm hearing stories of veterans who are struggling to get their benefits, of inefficiencies at government agencies like Social Security, the IRS. I have a problem with the way that Elon Musk was gathering all of our data into one roof, which is against federal law. So I think you and I agree on the fact that...
I don't know that that's the case. So you have anecdotal stories. I think we agree that
people should follow laws. I think that there are areas where we agree.
Yeah, but I think that the things that they were doing, I don't know if, and I don't want to go down a rat hole of Elon Musk right now, but I don't think, I think courts ultimately upheld everything they were doing. So frankly, I think that those should go deeper, especially into the Pentagon and some of those other big money things.
I agree.
Because I think that there's, on the contrast to you, I think there's major waste, fraud, and abuse that takes place in federal money and contracting. I think there's major, let's transition to local. I think there's major waste, fraud, and abuse that takes place in Clermont County. For example, Auditor Linda Fraley, if anybody pays attention, uses her office as a Friends and Family Employment Bureau and has for years and is still doing it. And we have 2 clerk of courts that's costing the taxpayers twice as much money. Hamilton County only has 1 clerk of court. So there's a lot of those things, to me, we don't have in the court system. We don't have online case origination or online filing, therefore preserving a bunch of jobs that the taxpayers are paying for people that manually handle all the paperwork, stuff like that. Right. There's a litany of this stuff. The animal shelter. I know you've been in the things for the animal shelter. We now spend at least I can document 2.5 times more taxpayer money on the animal shelter than we did before David Painter's taking over the animal shelter and making it a government facility. And it's probably more 3 or 4 times because I think they hide how much money they're spending. So I see a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse locally. So I'm going to get out locally with you. You were running for commissioner.
Yes.
I'm assuming as running for commissioner, you looked into things as commissioner and tried to be informed as you could. What's your opinion of the efficiency of local government? I'm talking the county level. I'm not going down to township. And when you were a candidate, were there specific things that you thought needed to be majorly reformed about the structure or operation of county government?
So I don't have the level of knowledge you do about the specific departments and agencies and how they could be more improved.
Okay.
Processes, for example, though, Like I looked into, they got a community develop. I believe that the county could do a better job with leveraging, making the most out of resources.
Okay.
So they got a community development block grant. And I read the best practices of these monies that they got from the federal government to use here in the county. Okay. And it said, leverage this money with other resources so that you can maximize the benefit and focus on the areas that are the most affected by some type of devastation or what have you. And I don't know that that's always the case. I feel like, and maybe this is an area where you and I agree, a lot of times resources go to the areas that have more money already and neglect the areas of Clermont County.
Or they go to consultants and things like that, where they get sucked up on things that don't actually...
Out-of-state consultants. And maybe they're the best place.
Whether it's a friend of Linda Fraley or David Painter or an out-of-state consultant, those resources oftentimes get squandered on things that don't directly align to the purpose of the resources.
Now, what I have learned from sitting in the county meetings is that I shouldn't be too quick to make broad judgments on county government as a whole, because I had a long conversation with somebody after today's commissioner meeting, and they told me about the different things they're doing to maximize their dollars, to make processes more efficient so that their services will work best on...
And was that related to economic development?
Community development.
Okay, so my thing, and then we can move on, is, you know, the number one most important thing about, well, you might not agree with me on this, but I'm gonna say it is that in our county, in terms of, in my view, in terms of economic development, is that we create an environment and we have the good quality jobs that people can raise families on. You know, not a fast food restaurant job. We don't need more of those. And that we understand that certain kind of jobs, like a restaurant, those are offshoots in many cases to there being other great quality jobs. So if I work at TQL and have a good job, maybe earn 6 figures or more, then I have disposable income. I can use that disposable income, go to restaurants, to go to, you know, what have you. And that's, you know, what's the dog and what's the tail.
Right.
And I would say, I would ask you to go look into the track record of our county in creating good quality jobs, which I would say is abhorrent. And I would ask you to take a visit out to South Afton, then look into that we were promised was going to be 2,000 jobs. Direct jobs, and we'll be lucky to be 400 or 500, including
automated.
Correct, because we attracted the kind of businesses that are highly automated or yet more automated, and they don't need workers.
And according to the Office of Community and Economic Development, soon they'll be opening their first line and start running food through, and hopefully by
that's
the
a
end
different
of the year,
that's a different thing. And Purina.
Right.
That deserves an investigation of like the 3 or 4 year project. Before the first.
So I think there are areas where we agree, and I feel like you asked about what my vision was initially. What my vision is for the county.
Yeah.
First and foremost, my vision is, and I spoke about this in today's meeting, is that we lower the temperature, we lower the rhetoric, and we have conversations like this with people that we might have deep divides with, ideologically speaking, and find that common ground that we could bridge out.
Well, what do you think is the temperature or rhetoric thing that needs to get lowered in Clermont County?
I think we all just need to listen to each other. Too many people are like, oh, the libs, the MAGAs, and I stay away from all that.
Okay, so I would fundamentally have a different view, because I think that you get played, and I think more people, I think you'll realize this at some point, you get played by these people. Let me give a good example. At what point in time, you and I have sat in several commissioner meetings relating to the animal shelter, were the commissioners ever listening?
Oh,
you know, they were never listening. And
they don't, but I'm not talking to them.
But my point is, but they're the people that are running the government.
Yeah.
And they don't feel an obligation to listen. They don't, you know what's so funny is, I think whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, is that we should all step back and realize that a predominant issue in our time is that our government is unable to solve problems that are important to everyday people, period.
Correct.
And I don't care whether it's Democrats in office, Republicans in office, who's in office.
Correct.
We are in a path where problems don't get solved. And I'll cause you to have if you know what I'm saying, don't have an aneurysm or anything when I say this. But I like to research anything where I hear about something So I listened to and this is, don't have an aneurysm. I listened to an Andrew Tate thing. You know who Andrew Tate?
Aneurysm.
Okay. So
I had an aneurysm for the record.
And he was talking about how do we expect young people to think that democracy and a republic form of government is the best form of government when it can't solve any of their problems. And they see other governments, and he gave the example, which is true. I've been there many times in Dubai, which is a strong, I want to know what I call it a dictator. It's a monarchy,
it's
basically.
An autocratic government.
But they have an annual, the emir has a weekly meeting where any citizen can come in and vent about a problem they have. Mm-hmm. And largely the problems get fixed the next day. So if you come in and say, I have a huge pothole on my street, they won't fix the pothole. The emir looks over, tells somebody, get the pothole fixed, it gets done. And so his point was, our young people are seeing that the government system that we all should know, whether we're liberal or conservative, is the best form of government, has become so bastardized, so owned by corporate interests, so owned by, low IQ individuals, that it can't solve problems for people. So how do we expect young people to think that that's the greatest form of government you can have when they see repeatedly after repeatedly scandal, corruption, can't solve problems? So that's the...
I mean, I agree with you. Not the fact that you want to listen to Andrew Tate.
Okay.
Because as a woman, I think he's just repugnant.
Okay.
But that is a problem that people have seen. But I'll throw this back on you. I mean, it did not happen in a vacuum, because these people got in office because we voted for them. And I'm going to say something that might get your dander up, but we have spent, my parents' generation, maybe the generation before, we've spent so much time focusing on these single issues: guns, abortion, gay marriage, all of those things, and who we vote for our politicians, that we have not focused on whether they have integrity and will actually do the job we're putting them in office to do. So if we have politicians that are non-responsive and not doing what we need, not meeting our needs, it's on us ultimately. So I feel like this is where the lowering the temperature and listening to each other comes into play. It's not going to get solved if we stay divided.
Okay, so let's come back to that lowering the temperature, because I think that lowering the temperature is a warm and fuzzy. Let's get along, warm and fuzzy, lower the temperature. So I want to ask you some kind of specifically. Okay. If you said from a policy, I think a lot of the lowering can be a diversion from actual solutions, okay? If you had to articulate what are, 1, 2, or 3 biggest problems in Clermont County that you think as a liberal person, or not opposite spectrum to me largely politically, that need to get resolved and fixed, what would those be?
Well, the first one is, 60% of Clermont County residents are working poor. They fall below the poverty line. They can't afford housing. Okay. Over 50% of us are cost burdened and can't afford our housing. So first and foremost, we need to address affordable housing, not houses out in the middle of nowhere that are like a quarter acre apart, that are going to start off at $900 million. So let's come back. Regular people houses. So I appreciate that. So working poor, people below the poverty line. So if you said this is the problem statement, we have working poor, people below the poverty. So I think a symptom of that is that they're cost burdened on housing. If they were making $200,000 a year, they'd be less cost burdened on housing than they are now. But I would say the root cause of it is that either the economic system doesn't provide for job opportunities that can provide an income level, a better income level for those people, which could be the result also of that the education system has failed in creating individuals who can command family supporting salaries. So when I say that, like if I said, let's say you and I, rather than this interview, we were trying to figure out, I would agree with you, there's a problem, okay? Working poor, if you look at around this county, there's a lot of poor people. And I have yet to hear any of these, we're standing right next to 101 East Main, any of these people articulate any vision to deal with that whatsoever. They might have Band-Aids on the wounds, but nothing to deal with the fundamental issue, which is going to be educational and job opportunity. How do you react to me saying that the root cause of the issue is that people having the skills, which is educational,
and there being job opportunity. Do you agree with that or not agree with that?
Generally speaking, yeah. I think it goes deeper than that.
Okay.
According to the National Council for County, I forget, NACO? I forget what it stands for. They said that a big thing to having a strong county government is to have a strong human infrastructure, which means affordable housing, healthcare, childcare, transportation. So yeah, it's all great to have the skills and the great paying jobs, but say like you live out in a rural area, your car breaks down, you can't get to work. So
just pretend like we're doing an interview, pretend like we're trying to solve this problem. I would come back and say, yeah, but everything you just mentioned, those things all ultimately are spackling over the underlying issue. Because if I give people medical this, I do this, if they aren't able to find, for example, job opportunity that generates a wage that's sufficient to support a family and so on and so forth, and to be upwardly mobile, then those things just are treating the symptom, which is that how do we make sure that we get an environment where very few people need those kind of assistances, because more people can find good jobs, be proud of where they're going in their lives, moving in the right direction economically. So I think, frankly, you could say, I don't agree with that, but I think what I just said is common sense that we would want to have that happen. I think you're bringing up, if we could agree that was the overall strategic objective, is get people to be more successful. In the interim, we need to do things to help people that hopefully as much as possible we make those things bridges to becoming more successful, not a permanent dependency. How do you react to that statement?
So, first off, I think that this conversation right here is the underlying difference between today's conservative and liberal parties, right? Conservatives tend to say, well, all this stuff you're talking about, if people just had better paying jobs and more money, then they wouldn't have those problems. Well, the other side says, yeah, but if you have stable housing, enough food to eat, that'll lead to stronger education outcomes, less recidivism in the whatever. So what would happen if, going to the lower the temperature, instead of focusing on the difference in who's right in the cause, we just say, you know what, all of this stuff is an issue. Let's agree to disagree on the problem and get down to figuring out how to just build a solid structure that'll work with everybody. What does that look like?
Well, I think my problem is with that would be, like, if we were just trying to solve this problem, is I don't disagree with what you said, okay? And I don't disagree that there are people in situations, because I know it from doing my own research, for example, educationally, where kids aren't going to school because mom and dad are, drug addicts. Or the kids can't even get clean clothes, so they're embarrassed to go to school. Some horrific conditions that obviously keep a kid from being able to realize their educational potential because of family situations that are, beyond the kid's control. It's not, one kid, so I get all that. I get that completely, and I just, so I think in having a solution, is, I feel sometimes like liberals want to focus on those things, like if we just do these social program things. And I think as a conservative, I focus on that, on the other side of that equation. I'm not against these things at all, but on the other side of the equation, that I think government has failed. These guys have failed. When their biggest economic development project in the last, how many years? 5 years? Is still not online and will only create,
talking about Pure?
Yeah, will only create about 300 jobs. Then that is not doing that side of the equation at all. Okay, and it used to be, this village, Ken Geis is the administrator, and I like Ken Geis, and people know I like Ken Geis, and I get demonized over it. But whether you like him or not, there's 10,000 TQL jobs. They demonize him when they should be going to him. Chris McClintock should be going to Ken Geis saying, "Can you help us?" Because we need to. And my thing is, there's a lack of. Frankly, you're saying this. I think there's a lack of that side of it, but I think on the other side of it. On the other side of the equation, and I put something online where I went to a little thing where I went to some meeting the government had, Chris McClintock wasn't there, the director of economic development, but it was about HUD money and stuff like this. And I felt like it was just a, go through the motions exercise to check a box, when in reality, the prevailing wind of some of the people that are on my Republican side is that we just don't want these people. Like we don't want affordable housing because it attracts the wrong kind of people. We don't want this because it attracts the wrong kind of people. We don't want this. So you go through the motions, and I think that's ridiculous. And I think that as a conservative, I feel like we need to be engaging. And you probably don't have an aneurysm, but you already know I'm a huge Trump person.
What?
Okay. So, but and it's like if you look at Trump's appeal, a lot of the working poor are Trump's appeal. So I even brought up in that meeting, maybe you guys should be looking at this, even if you're kind of right-wingers or we have a conservative mentality government in Clermont County, be looking at it. Maybe if you look at it as like, well, hold on, even in poor people, there's a significant base there that is a conservative base that wants to find solutions to move forward productively and became Trump supporters because they can see that the system is not, it may be putting Band-Aids on, giving them assistance, but it's not helping them to get into a better position ultimately than they're in.
So, let me turn this back on you because you keep talking about we don't have a government that works. Okay. Let's just assume right now Elon Musk's totally destroyed our government as we know it, or in some perspectives made it better by getting rid of a bunch of stuff that you don't like.
No,
let's just say we had to start over from scratch. For whatever reason, we're starting over from scratch.
Yeah.
What does an effective functioning government look like to you? What is necessary to make government work for every people? What departments? What agencies? What does that look like?
So if I were...
And just how do we get there together? Because I think that together is the key point. We can't keep saying, well, conservatives and liberals, because we're all in this country together, and we need all of the voices to make this work.
I think that on almost every front, if somebody can separate any sort of love of government or affection of government in the equation, and if we could go back to what if we were doing starting from scratch completely, okay, and then I would say government shouldn't even be doing most of these things. The community should be doing them. But I want to pull it back to say that almost everything, in my view, and I'd ask you to give me an example, and you might be able to give me an example, that the government touches in the spirit of, we are going to help you. We're going to help you in higher education with loans. We're going to help you in public education with funding. We're going to help you in medical with programs to help you medically, Medicaid, what have you. Every area the government tends to get into ends up becoming less efficient and less responsive. And so I compare, so many years ago I had LASIK surgery on my eyes, which is not covered by medical. Well, you look at that, the price keeps going down, when people have to pay for it out of their own pocket. So my point is that if I'm not going back to, revolutionary days and what are the pure functions of the federal government, but I am saying that I wish that liberals and conservatives could see that when the government tries to run and manage some of these things, and believe me, I get the notion of there's abuse that happens when you have certain public-private partnership type things when third parties, so I get that. But when the government tries to do things, they almost always, in the spirit of we're going to make it better for you, end up making it worse in the long run. And it's pandering. There's a lot of the government that's pandering. You mentioned what I call shiny object issues, where the uniparty of Democrats and Republicans is all too happy to keep us focused on guns, abortion, and other stuff, while they're doing whatever the hell they want to do on the issues that affect our daily lives. And so how do you react to the whole notion that government, when its solution to the problem is create government bureaucracy, that it almost always ultimately results in worse outcomes?
First, I need you to define for me what you mean by the government and what you mean by the bureaucracy, so that we're speaking of apples and apples.
So, for purposes of right now, but I want to bring it back because I'm the one that told you we wanted to focus on local. I'm mentally thinking of the federal government, okay? And all of the functions that it performs, from student loans. Student loans used to be run by third-party
companies. But what is
companies.
the government? Is it like the elected leaders? Is it all the institutions we have? Is it the federal bureaucracy?
It's anything that fits within a budget, okay? A federal budget. But let me just come back to the point.
So like
because I don't want to get off on the weeds. I want to come back to is when I make the statement that things the government tries to run, whether it's putting in car chargers, okay? Whether it's putting in putting in a new rail line in California. Doing that, when government tries to run the things, the almost universal outcome is a less efficiency and less responsiveness in terms of actually solving the core problems. But they love to pander, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they love to pander to the citizens and get them, we're helping you. When in reality, if you look at it, you realize, especially if you're not the people that are being quote unquote helped, that this is actually sucking these people into something that ultimately doesn't advance them and leaves them ultimately worse off than they were before. So how do you react to just the general notion of that government, when it tries to bureaucratically run things, tends to do so in an inefficient manner that ends up being less responsive to people and causes costs to explode?
Honestly, I would argue it's not the government, it's the ideological divide we have with our elected officials. Okay, so let's look at the big talking point right now, okay? Means-tested benefits, okay? I've talked about this in commissioner meetings. I won't go into all the details just out of respect for my kids, but I used to be married in Butler County. I had to have my husband arrested because he threatened to kill me.
Okay.
So he's arrested on domestic violence charges.
Okay.
2 weeks after that, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, prior to that time, I was working as a teacher.
Okay.
Okay. Teachers don't pay into Social Security.
Right.
So that dumps me into means-tested benefits. Now I rely on Medicaid, Social Security, SNAP, all of the things. But we're so hyper-focused on let's make sure these people aren't stealing our money, or that the wrong people aren't getting let me finish. You asked me a long question. Aren't using the money incorrectly or fraudulently, that we have so many rules in place that yes, you make $5 too much, you lose. You don't break even, you don't break ahead, you lose. You lose food assistance, maybe medical assistance. You definitely lose SSI assistance. So it is impossible to get ahead. And there are pilot programs across the country where they have given people like $1,000 a month for a year just to go to they're gonna just piss it away. $1,000 a year, no strings attached. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in addition to the federal benefits they were already getting, which Medicaid and SNAP, they do get federal dollars, but they're state administered programs for the record, and local. But those people, once they learned how to use that money efficiently, they did things to improve their lives, whether it be improve their housing, improve their education, so that they could get off of assistance.
Okay, so you're a lot of what you had in that answer, so there's.
And then they no longer needed assistance after that.
I think that your answer you just gave proved my point. So if I were in charge of the world, and you might say this is draconian, and you had an assistance program like SNAP, okay, my view would be, okay, we need to make educational resources available to people to learn how to use money effectively, stuff like that, okay? Frankly, stuff that the school should have taught them, okay? But you should learn this in 12 years of
what I missed out.
How to use money efficiently, how to manage your life. The government, your award of the government for education for 12 grades, right? 13 grades if you count kindergarten. If people don't know how to register to vote, if they don't know how to do basic money management when they come out of a 13-year government sanctioned program, then the government is not doing the right thing in that program. But back to your specific examples you gave, and my view would be like, okay, we need to have resources available to people to learn, by the way, I would do things like, and you might ban at this, give them free Dave Ramsey courses, to learn how to manage their money better, because there's better solutions in the private sector for that. But all that said, I would just give people the money, frankly. If somebody said, this person gets $1,000 a month SNAP benefits while they're in this condition, I would just give them the money and say, you know what, here's the money, here's what you should use it for, here's where you can get resources to help you spend it efficiently. And if you blow it on the wrong things, that's on you, okay? Because we don't help people when it's micromanaged. My point to what you're saying is everything's micromanaged. $5 this, $5 this. Well, I worked at the United Dairy Farmers when I was a kid in high school, and people would come in and use their food stamps at that time to buy a 3-cent piece of candy to get 97 cents, then go outside and come back in and try to use the 97 cents to buy a pack of generic cigarettes. So you have the regulations. A lot of these regulations are easily thwarted by people. They figure out, or it puts them in a worse situation because they're black marketing stuff, selling their SNAP card on the black market or something like that. But everything you just brought up about all these rules, all that kind of stuff, I think there needs to be basic rules, like you qualify or don't qualify based on something.
Oh, yeah. But
all these internal rules to these programs is an example of how government adds a huge level of bureaucracy to it. Oftentimes it gets increasingly, there's nothing, do nothing, and there's what it is today. And I bet you reasonable people could figure out, well, what we have today, a lot of that stuff doesn't really help to the end goal. Maybe it's not, we shouldn't have nothing, but we should have but we need to manage how much regulation we're attaching to all this stuff, because then it becomes a game of the people trying to work the regulations versus what they should be focusing on is how do you use this assistance during this time period to be able to move forward as productively as possible.
Let me ask you this. What is your opinion? When did we, as American citizens, stop trusting each other? When did we stop trusting each other? Because the default is, if we don't tell them what to do, they're going to blow it on the wrong stuff. If we don't tell them how they're supposed to spend it, they'll blow it on the wrong stuff.
Yeah, I think they will.
What you said.
Well, I think they largely will. So my point
is, what led you to that premise?
Once you start
getting, is the underpinning of our own personal philosophy of government.
Once I'm a taxpayer, and once another taxpayer claims a right to money I'm paying in, okay, then I have an interest in that money is used efficiently. I have an interest, I consider it to be a red herring to talk about people trusting each other, because the point is, if you're receiving a benefit that is coming from other taxpayers, which is what it is, it's not a magic printing press other than China until we go bankrupt, but it's coming from other taxpayers, then you have an obligation. I see a lot of people, and you could see it, we could sit and watch things where people seem entitled to these things, and they're the ones bitching and moaning without, they just had that clip yesterday of Arnold Schwarzenegger on The View, where they expected him to be more liberal on immigration, when what he brought up was, when you come in the country, you should be respectful, and you should be asking yourself, I'm getting a lot of benefits, how am I going to give back? And so people that are receiving it would be like, if my kid, you said you have kids, I only have one kid, okay? But if he were asking me for money, it's not a case of, if he started blowing the money on stupid shit, or I felt like there was a risk of that, then I'm going to intervene in some way. So trust is earned. So it's not like someday somebody says, I don't trust, So I think that there's been so many abuses.
My children have been telling me that for the last 5 years, and that's their rationale on why they don't have to listen to me.
Okay.
I feel like, and this is just basic, I guess maybe spirituality, general spirituality principles. If we don't start working on, and by we, I mean you, me, for example, on a basic level of trust and giving each other the benefit of the doubt that we want the right things. Like I posted my thing about the No Kings rally.
Okay.
What was your knee-jerk reaction?
Stay away from it.
Why?
Because I feel like just the same difference as I would tell somebody who was anti-Trump to stay away from a Trump.
It wasn't an anti-Trump rally.
So yes, it was.
No, it was not.
Yes, it was. Okay,
I
the
hosted it.
Point,
I should know.
Okay,
but
so then
see,
what king was it referring to? What rally was it?
What rally? No
yeah,
rally?
If it wasn't an anti-Trump rally, what was it a rally about? What was it then?
Anti-tyranny.
Okay, so what's the tyranny it's anti?
Well, I don't want to get into that.
I don't remember a No Kings. Hold on. I don't remember a No Kings rally when Biden was president.
Well, okay. Did Biden go to immigration courts where somebody was going to do what they're supposed to do in their natural process to become an immigrant so that he could arrest them and deport them?
Well, that's
autocratic. Did Joe Biden automatically
so
freeze
I think
a
now
bunch of
we're
funds?
getting, without getting into those things.
So we get into those details.
You just proved my point.
Yeah,
it's an anti-Trump rally.
No, it wasn't.
There
are there at no point did that rally.
Okay.
Did anybody in that rally talk about a political coup where we need to remove Donald Trump. It was about
That's different
being
than
vigilant.
Most rallies that are anti-something aren't that we need to remove somebody.
This was not.
Okay, but my point, you asked a question.
This was about standing up.
I want to bring it back to Clermont County specific.
It was Clermont County.
But you asked me, my reaction of stay away from it, which I did, okay, is that it's just going to inflame things, and I would have had the same exact advice as a person who has personally organized probably 20 Trump honkin' waves during the 2016, 2020, and 24 election cycles. I would have told liberals to stay away from that too. Okay, it's not, the purpose of it isn't to have it's not having a debating society. Now, if somebody wants to have a meeting that is meant to be a discussion meeting, okay, on working through some issues and challenges, that's kind of a different thing. But if a group of people, and this is something I think needs to change in our culture, if a group of people want to use their First Amendment rights to protest whatever they want to protest, okay, they should be permitted to do so without opposition people coming in and trying to disrupt in any way or interfere in any way with their activity to express their First Amendment rights. And I would have had the same exact feeling when the whole thing happened with Bethel and the Black Lives Matter thing. I'm totally against Black Lives Matter. But I would have said, let the kids have their rally and just leave them alone, which is by and large what happened in all the small towns of the East. A significant number of them had, high school kids or whatever typically, put together some Black Lives Matter rally, 20, 30 people show up. I don't know about who turned violent. Most of them, other than Bethel, they just happened and went away because other people need to respect. And that's a key point.
Okay. I understand
is that if you're
going
to go, if your First Amendment rights, and a bunch of Trump supporters, which are people that would typically be, I would know, show up or feel like we'll show up and show them, and we're going to have a counter protest, that goes against your whole thing of like, we need to reduce the temperature. I think people have a right to protest, and they can protest, just let them. And most of the time, if you just let people protest, they move on. It is what it is. What makes it unfortunate is when you have, now we're going to turn a protest into a riot, because, and part of that can be the intent of people having the protest. And I'm not saying that anybody in the Kings thing was, but it could be intent of the people, but it can be the result of people, counter protesters showing up. You know what I'm saying? It like pours gasoline on it all, and it's not, particularly productive. But for sake of right now, okay?
Right.
And we've had a pretty long discussion so far, but you said the working poor and addressing the working poor is one of the key county issues. If I were to ask you what are 2 or 3 other issues in Clermont County that you think are core issues, what would you say?
You know what? When I was out here doing, you're not going to agree with me. You might want to even interrupt me, and that's fine, whatever. But when I was doing the early voting,
maybe I'm going to have an aneurysm. So go ahead.
When I was out here doing the early voting and talking to people, I talked to the Republican greetings. I don't know how many people, conservatives, Republican, MAGA, or whatever, Democrats, liberals, whatever, we all agree on the one basic thing that has happened in the last 10 years, 20 years. In my opinion, it started after 9/11. That we have gotten to a place where there are friends, family, that we can no longer talk to because politics. And so when I say lower the temperature, what I mean is we need to be able to do this. And I will tell you for the record, I understand now where you're coming from and why you posted that. However, I don't know that everybody did, because it was described as being a volatile event that we decided to have it on Flag Day, which
I don't think I used that word, but
somebody else did. So it's disgusting that we tried to have something like that.
But that's just normal.
Like
people, I mean, part of
that's
it is
the temperature. When
part
I
of
say
it is
lower
people
the
like you whipping out your phone and social media, and I'm guilty of this.
The rhetoric.
Is that, and then also social media allows cliques of people that are not representative of the overall community at large to band together and feel like they are more representative of the community than they really are.
Okay.
So you have a group, a No Kings group. I'm just making an example. I don't know if it even exists. And then those people all feel like everybody agrees with them. Okay. When in reality, because a lot of us don't interact, like, let me ask you this.
Right. So
as far as conservatives go, Okay, and you and I, to be honest, every time we've been in a commissioner meeting, if we have any interaction, it ends in an argument. And
you shut me down because you don't like what I have to say is what happens.
So, from a conservative, somebody associated with the Republican Party, I am a committeeman, all this kind of stuff. I might be the first person that's talked to you in a conversational way, or like this long. Who else has talked to you like this for this long that's an active member of the Clermont County Republican Party?
I don't know what party they belong to, but I will tell you this. At the rally, a woman approached me and she brought up her concerns that it was at the park. Why did you choose here? Why did you choose the helicopter? I think it's disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. So I explained the process on how that happened. Okay. I explained that my goal initially was to have people come together and try to bridge that.
So were you the coordinator for here?
I was the host for the rally.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And my intent was initially for it to be the exact same scenario you described, where we sit down and we discuss our divides and try to build community with each other. But I showed up and there were already 100 people there, and they kept coming. And they kept coming. Next thing you know, there's like 500 people there who felt really happy to be there in that space with other people because they feel shut out.
Okay, and they have the right to do that. And so, like I've already. So I am actually...
Like they are, and it wasn't that everybody in the county agrees with them. It was that they felt like nobody agreed with them.
Was there a No Kings protest in Anderson Township?
I do not know. I know there was one in Loveland.
Okay.
I know there was one in
Clifton. So I'm
Clifton.
thinking that, I don't know, but I'm thinking you probably drew a lot of people. I know, but you probably drew a lot of people from eastern Hamilton County to that.
Most of it was actually from Clermont County. Some people were from Anderson.
By the way, my reaction to it.
Some people were from Anderson.
My reaction to it isn't that it makes the people evil or demonize them or they're crazies or what have you. Okay, I'm not saying they may be those things. However, that's not my point with it is I've always said that conservatives and Republicans in Clermont County need to wake up. The crony system of government in Clermont County is going to bite Republicans and conservatives in the ass if they don't engage the community more. And so I've always been on, that's why one of the reasons I'm hated so much is because my view is a crony insider system.
I know, because you like to poke the bear is why. You like to poke the bear.
Well,
and that's fine, because poking the bear...
Well, what's the bear? What's the bear?
Whatever the issue is. Right now, it's the GOP. You like to poke the bear.
Okay.
Because
what's the issue with the GOP?
If you do it in a non-violent way,
what's the issue with the GOP?
Change. Yours?
What's the issue with the GOP?
The issue I've seen with the GOP is corruption, cronyism.
Okay.
Because it's all inbred. I mean, look, we've got the president of the county commissioners.
Yeah.
Is the president of the GOP and the president of the County Commissioners Association of Ohio.
Okay.
And is really
and I want to point out, will not
really
like
besties with the governor
and will not
senators.
sit for an interview. By the way, and will not sit for an interview. Okay?
Literally, you can look this up because it is on his little YouTube channel. Literally told me, Ms. Mazzuckelli, when I asked for town halls where people could attend, voice their complaints and concerns, he said to me, and this is on film, Ms. Mazzuckelli, I hope you understand I am not going to change anything I do, no matter what you say.
And that's the attitude
that is
David
the problem
Painter
with
and
our
some
government.
of these people will be remembered as the people that when they needed to engage the community more, stuck to their pattern of their loyalty is to the crony system, not to trying to re-engage the community.
David Taylor, Bernie Moreno, John Husted, David Painter, I guess, all of them. What are they getting out of it? They're all getting money somehow. I don't know how.
I mean,
J.D. Vance, Bernie Moreno, crypto. John Husted.
Okay, so
I don't know.
See, here's what
they're all getting
I
money
get confused.
from something. So I say get big money out of politics.
There are very real things that one can focus on, like Linda Fraley using her office for friends and family employment. There are very real things like our elected officials refusing to sit for any interview. When you go into these things like they're making money, they're doing this, they're doing that, then that gets into a hearsay thing.
No. Because it's been widely reported.
But it's not going to be but why don't we focus on the practical things?
This is a practical thing.
That our elected officials should be available.
This is a practical thing because, look, okay, let's just use David Taylor, our representative, as an example. How much money of his own did he donate to his campaign? Now, you don't like Democrats, but many Democrats, I was saying Greg Landsman, for example, does not take corporate donors. He does not take money from corporate donors. A lot of their money comes from small donations. So if you get all of your money, you got $2 million you could pour in your campaign, why do you even need to waste your time with the people and find out what the people want and check back with the people to find out if you're doing what they actually want you to do?
There is very nobody. Practical. I don't think there is anybody in this county who has done more to try to hold elected officials accountable to being available to speaking to this than me. I have 3 federal lawsuit victories. I have, because it is completely unacceptable. David Taylor's behavior, but rather than focus on somehow David Taylor campaign finance, all this kind of stuff, the thing that to me to focus on is that David Taylor won't set for any interviews. He won't with me. He won't with the Inquirer. He won't with anybody.
He won't have a town hall meeting.
And so let's stop right there, because everybody, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, should agree. Elected officials should be available to their constituents in events and interviews and things like that, period. I would have the same exact view.
The actual official, not their staffers.
I know, I agree. So,
not their staffers.
So, and it should not be, and part of that is that the community, okay, and this is the lowering the temperature thing too,
yes,
is if they make themselves available. Now, there's one thing, an interview is very safe, right? Because you just have basically you and me, okay? There's not a big mob here. The community needs to be united in the idea that if the elected official is making a good faith effort to be available, then when they make themselves available, they can't get attacked and they can't get this and they can't get people throwing a chair. We as the citizenry, because I think one of the things that happens, and it probably happens on either side, is we give them the excuse. We voters give some of these elected officials the excuse of, well, I can't do this kind of thing because the liberals create a mob scene or the conservatives create a mob scene, and so, but that doesn't take away. Let's start simple.
Yeah.
David Taylor and all these commissioners right behind us here in this building, they all refuse to sit for any interviews.
Right.
Okay. That's before we get to having an open town hall, before we get to having this, the notion that these people won't submit to interviews, and that is the disease. The disease is that they don't make themselves available. They live in an echo chamber. And I don't want to go on a tangent, but Bob McEwen, you may not remember Bob McEwen. So he was a congressman from this area for a long time. Mm-hmm. And he described, he's a nice guy on one level, but they're all swamp. So I have a negative view of all politicians.
I get that.
But he used to claim that, for example, in Washington, D.C., that Republicans and Democrat congressmen mostly lived there. And then in the 80s and 90s, there became a press that you need to be back home with your constituents. So what happens is you come back home to your constituents and you get all whipped up. Greg Landsman, maybe, I don't know whether he lives in D.C. or not, but he comes back on the weekends, gets whipped up. You got to fight for this, you got to fight for that. And Bob McEwen would point out to me that when that trend started, it ended there being discussions between the people. They weren't there on the weekend where they could go to dinner together. They didn't go to lunch together. He described that they used to have every Friday, the Congress would have some congressman would have to open their office up for a social.
And
he's like, and so he was a teetotaler. He was a teetotaler.
Okay.
And but he says, so it was the only time he ever bought alcohol was for this thing. And he's like, but it was amazing how much you learn by going in their office, seeing pictures, their family, their dogs, what interested them. And he's like, all of that has been lost. This is Bob McEwen. And
I feel like a lot of that has to do with an increase in our population because back in the day, the framers of
same number of congressmen.
Right. The framers of our government had the intention that we'd be able to see our representatives in the grocery store out around town and grab them and say, hey, bro, just like you can.
I think that the framers I think that the framers
Batavia,
had the view that these elected officials would work together in collaboration to solve problems.
Right.
And that the political system, people would move towards the middle, to be honest, because they would tend to move towards the middle and move towards solutions.
Right.
And what we have now is a situation in which many of the elected officials, Republican or Democrat, and they don't really want to solve the issues.
Right.
Because the issues is how they propel their fundraising. It's how they do this. And it ends up in these asinine things. Now, you might start arguing with me when I say this, is like, so if I said, and I'm not asking you to respond to this actually, because it'll go down, but if I said, somebody who enters the country illegally, knowingly illegally, is committing a crime. Okay? So what happens today is that basic facts, like whether you think it was right or wrong for them to do that, okay, you could have a view that, yeah, it's illegal, but it's okay. It's right. It's still right. It's morally justified. But we tend to be, our uniparty leaders tend to get us so focused on a polarization that we can't even admit to basic things. Like, I don't understand, why Democrats want to be like, yeah, we need to have a secure border. At the same time, personally, my view is we should have secure borders and we should have a much more robust immigration policy that lets a lot more people in. We should have both of those things.
Okay.
So.
And yet, we've been trying to reform immigration law and policy to make those two things happen since the 80s, and we can't get it done.
What we've been doing is we've gone through waves.
We've talked about it.
We've gone through. All we've really done is gone through waves of who's ready to offer the biggest amnesty to people who have entered the country illegally, and that is not reform. It's kind of like today. Let me give you this example, and then I want to move back and wrap it up. But it's kind of like today. So, do you support college loan forgiveness?
Well, I believe that's what that was supposed to be was bastardized. So generally speaking, no. The limited program that was trying to put in place was to aid people who are affected by COVID, and the people who had been paying on the principal for the entire life of the loan, paid off the principal and were still paying interest on their loan, because that system is
so you're generally against.
So I believe if you take out a loan, you pay your loan.
Okay, so good. We should agree on that. Okay, and what we should both also be able to agree on, because some of those loan forgivenesses have related to. So the camera turned off and we lost a little bit of the interview. I effectively went on to talk about, even if one believed that there was some level of student loan forgiveness that was ever required or made any sense, that would never be without significant reform taking place to the educational system, such that you don't keep creating a situation in which people come out with skills that don't earn them enough money to pay off their loans. So the camera went off. We talked about that for a few more minutes. Then we started to talk about some medical and research issues, and that's where we pick up. So the camera turned off. It only goes for an hour. We've been having a good time talking.
Yes.
So I don't know what all we lost, and I'll figure out how to make sure we capture it. And we were talking about medical stuff, and I know you were trying to make a point. We're not going to solve, this issue.
Right.
So let's come back real quick here and
wrap
up.
Let me shorten my question real quick. I'm going to ask you a question.
Yep.
So my point is, they know that postmenopausal women are more prone to developing ovarian cancer. They still don't know why. They've known that for 50 years. They still don't know why. Now, let's just say Harvard was working on trying to find the solution for that. Would you rather have the solution be a public-private partnership between a university and the government?
I would rather the solution be private sector.
Or a pharmaceutical company that'll charge out the ass for
I would rather the solution be private sector in every case.
It be owned by
because innovation is 10x to the private sector. That's why things like laser eye surgery, the price went down.
Well, just like a car, just like EVs.
As soon as you introduce bureaucracy into something, you no longer have the same, you might cringe, capitalistic type focus, which is we research, we have a product. At the beginning,
let the record show I did not cringe.
Let me begin. At the beginning, we can charge an exorbitant amount of money for the product. Like I remember buying two $5,000 flat panel TVs when those started to become available. Now I can go buy bigger TVs for like $250. The price went like this.
Right.
Why? Because the R&D, they then have to think, how do I get to the next market?
Right.
So my point is that a lot of these things, what we've had is the government move us into medical and into
bureaucratic solutions. And another thing, and we're not going to solve this today, but we can talk about it some other time, is where pharmaceutical companies now are motivated almost entirely to develop products that you use for the rest of your life. You know, in the olden days, like a polio vaccine, you took the polio vaccine. You got syphilis, you took penicillin. Okay.
I don't know. I never got syphilis.
I never either. But that's what I read. So, but my point is, now it's like everything is. We're not actually going to solve the problem. It's a reflection of our society. We don't solve the medical issue. We come up with a pill that you'll take for the rest of your life, and you'll pay a pharmaceutical company, and they'll lobby the government to subsidize the cost of it so that they make money no matter what. And that is there's so many fundamental things wrong with the medical system that goes with all of this, but a lot of it has to do with the move away from, as my grandma would say when she was passed away, got a long time ago, but when she grew up in Mount Adams, the doctor knew everybody and would take a chicken and trade for treatment, knew who was on hard times, knew this, to the kind of solution you have today where doctors are disconnected from the people largely, and largely are just looking for what they can prescribe you. Is what's the next prescription I can write for this person? Because everything has been, I'm going to share one thing about this, and then I want to go back to the county and finish up here. So Terry Johnson, who's a senator, one time, to his much dismay, we were sitting next to each other on an airplane for 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't like me, and I don't like him. Okay?
Sorry about that.
But he was bringing up as a doctor how they don't even treat proper diagnostic skills to doctors anymore, and everything is a pharmacological solution. They're just looking for a pill you can take that masks over whatever the issue is, never really solves it, and the rest of your life and so there's so many issues. Let's come back to the county and wrap up. Okay. So you brought up working poor. There was probably something else in there. I think you had a second one. But let's say you had been elected commissioner.
Yes.
And you were giving your speech, and you had to say, these are the 3 issues that as a commissioner, specific to Clermont County, that I want to be part of solving. One of them, you already said, the first one was working poor. In the plight some people are in.
I mean, different things.
Just take it real quick. You got 30 seconds. 3 things.
First thing, rebuild and strengthen the civic town square. Number 2.
Okay.
Have a public or some solution for real journalism, because we need to get back to the point where we talk to each other, even if we disagree, especially if we disagree, and where we're all working off of the same set of facts. Those 2 things underpin healthy democracy.
Revive the real town square. Bring back journalism.
Civic.
Okay.
And then 3rd, work together to find evidence-based solutions to solve our community's problems. Because saying, I think this is the problem and I think this is the problem isn't going to solve it. We need to go look at case studies of what has worked before.
Okay, so let me ask you another question.
And adopt it.
This is the rapid fire round, okay? Because I got to go into the meeting I'm going to. And you've been very patient sitting here with me for a long time.
I told you, I never met a stranger. We're best friends now.
If I said, let's not go crazy.
I'm going to shake your hand and then turn you blue.
So
it'll happen.
If you said, what do you think are the biggest 3 concerns of Clermont Countyans? What do you think the 3 biggest concerns are? Rapid fire, go.
Well, housing, taxes. And I know a lot of people right now are upset about the, housing and taxes, that falls into one. And the 3rd one would be having laws passed, having the will of the people ignored by our elected officials.
So
I would think those are 3 things that we universally agree on.
Okay, so I think that
taxes are too high, not enough housing.
I think that,
and our elected leaders don't listen to us.
So I'm gonna give you my reaction to these points. Okay.
You agree.
I don't think the town square journalism and evidence-based solution, that's a huge nothing burger. Okay. That's my, that's a bunch of pablum. Okay. I don't even know.
I don't even know what that word
I don't know what
means.
the government. I don't want the government to bring back journalism. Pablum means it is meaningless ultimately. It's like we should have puppy dogs, flowers, sunshine.
When I say that, I mean like the same public, private.
I don't want to get into it.
That could be like
but I don't think the government has a role.
It absolutely
the issue
does
with
have a role.
Journalism isn't that the government should have a role.
It's always had a role. From the beginning, it's had a role. Because news is important to our civic life.
Okay.
And being an informed
No, I disagree.
elector.
So I'm not going to agree.
It's vital.
The notion of last thing I want is the government figuring out how we should do news.
No, I don't mean state news.
Okay,
Like
so
a state-owned news.
we're supposed to be talking about Clermont County.
I am
so
talking
I said
about
Clermont County.
County.
Your three things were revive the civic town square.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sitting around
journalism,
talking
bring
like
back
this.
journalism, and collaborate on evidence-based solutions.
You want to get
I
me
asked
into a
you what
box?
are the three things: housing, taxes, and people not being happy with the laws passed or the laws being followed that are
Elected
passed.
officials
Okay.
not
So-
following the will of the people.
Okay, so by the way, at the county level, they don't pass laws. Okay, there's no such thing as a law at the county level. Laws
At
are
the
only
county
passed
level,
by
do
the
you vote for your representative
They're
in
only
this
passed
county?
by
We've
the
got two
legislature.
reps, and they don't
Yeah,
listen
but you
to
were
us.
running
Adam
for- you
Byrd,
were running
Gene
for-
Schmidt.
You were running for
But I'm
commissioner.
not now.
Okay.
I'm not
So
now. I'm
laws
a regular
passed. Okay.
citizen, and I'm speaking to you as a
And then
regular
housing and
county
taxes.
citizen of what I am.
So what's
a
funny
third.
is if somebody were asking me that question,
Yeah.
I would say like, and I thought
You
about
would
it, but I don't
say-
have it written down. Okay.
You know,
I would
Jen
say
said a lot of
property
things I
taxes.
agree
No,
with.
I would say property taxes.
Put that
Okay.
on there.
I would
put
say
taxes.
education. Okay. I would say job opportunity.
Okay.
Property taxes, education, job opportunity.
You know
Those
what
are
my
the three
counterpoint
things.
to that would
Those
be?
are the three things in Clermont County.
Do you know what my counterpoint to that would be? Look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to have your economic needs taken care of first. That's stable housing, food, security, before education's going to mean a damn. I taught at an inner
Yeah, I
city
don't think-
school. I taught kids that were poor.
Okay, so
If you're
I've told
hungry,
you.
you don't
I
learn.
told you what I think. What did I say? Property taxes. What's probably to me is the biggest thing.
Education and good paying
Education
jobs.
and job opportunity.
I say they're
because
all
those are the
connected.
three things that government can uniquely address. All these other things, private enterprise can address journalism. Et cetera. Like so, right now, if you say journalism, one of the things that should go away in Ohio is that the requirement to place legal ads in certain media because the government uses that to subsidize media. So, like the Clermont Sun probably wouldn't be in business today if it weren't for the fact there's a law that says the county has to buy a bunch of advertising in the Clermont Sun.
Yeah. The
You follow what
Clermont
I'm saying?
Sun- The Clermont Sun is not news, though. It's
I agree.
basically a PR piece.
I agree. It's press
We
releases
need local
for that.
journalism
All
because
right.
we need to talk to each other
So
about
I don't
the
know that
same
I've
setback.
actually,
Here, let's end with this. You've talked a lot. You've dominated it. How about this? We both agree that we need to work together to solve our problems.
we don't agree. I don't agree with that.
You don't agree that you have to. You had the whole thing. I'm not going
I
to
don't
remember
agree
exactly
that I
what
need to
you
work
said.
with you to solve our problem.
Sitting down, talking to each other, and getting a better understanding with each other. Yes, you said something about that.
I don't agree that. So the way you connoted that, that we agree that we need to work together to. No, I don't agree with that. Now, if you said, "Do you want to collaborate on solving a specific problem?"
Okay, then
Okay,
that.
and it was a problem I cared about, I might say like, "Yeah, I'm okay with doing that."
Okay, then
But
that.
I don't like to start it with this universal, intergalactic God and Jesus thing of we agree
I
we
didn't
have to
say
work on
anything
solving
about
our
God and
problems.
Jesus. That's
I
a
would
whole
I would
different
work on
conversation.
solving, and maybe we can have a discussion, or get some other. I could get some Republicans and conservatives.
That's
you
my
get some
point.
Democrats. By the way,
Let's
you know what that
work
would
on
do. You
getting
know what that would do.
together
By the way,
some
you've
type of
already
community
ascertained.
engagement.
You've ascertained. I'm pretty unflappable in my conservative views. I think you're pretty unflappable in your views.
I'm not.
So the let me say, I'm pretty unflappable. Maybe in a different way. I'm pretty unflappable in my philosophy. You're probably pretty unflappable in your philosophy. Now, things you might change within that, based on the time and situation, but you have an overriding philosophy. You come from a certain perspective to start with at issues. I come from a certain perspective. We're probably not going to change each other,
No.
but we might be able to figure out what are. I don't know that you and I have the power or authority to solve anything, but I'll tell you what.
What
It
I
would
was
scare
gonna-
the hell out of
what
some
I
of
was-
these people right here.
Yeah.
It would scare the hell out of them, okay? That there were actual people in the community saying, hey, you know what, Claire, Bonnie, Dave, Diamond Dave, if you won't even sit for interviews, if you won't solve any problems, if you feel like the solution to everything is just maintain the status quo, okay, well then we should go do stuff and try to figure out where are the things not to get, and I think this is very important, not to get people to change,
No.
but to figure out where are the things that we could have a shared view. For example,
That is what I meant. So I used
let's
the
use
wrong
one-
words, but that's what I meant. So my
before we get
question
done here,
was,
before we get done,
will you make a commitment to work with me to make something like that happen? Because when both sides put the leverage on those
my
people,
only answer could be possibly. It depends on what it is, and it depends on the contours and structure. But that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask. That's all you can ask for from me right now is to say possible. Okay, we got to determine the issue.
You got that on the record.
And so
he said he's my new best friend, and he's going to work with me to solve Clermont County's problems.
So I think because
he agrees with everything I said.
It's to figure out where are the things, like we should all be of violent agreement, not violent agreement. We should all be of agreement.
Yes.
That corruption in our government is unacceptable.
Correct.
Okay? Cronyism should be unacceptable.
Yes.
Okay? Appointees based on who you know versus your skills, that should be unacceptable.
That is correct.
That's something I would work with anybody who wants to work on that issue.
I think we all agree on that.
It's not going to change my perception on other things. And I appreciate at least at one level if you would pick up on, because you mentioned this on the federal level, the abortion, guns, that kind of stuff, is that a lot of these politicians, they want us to be focused on those issues. They don't want us to be focused on okay.
Are you going to steal money from your campaign and store it in the freezer?
Well, hold on. By the way, I think that the issue, there's many issues. One issue, and I'm not saying this would be the issue.
Also a Democrat.
I'm not saying this would be the issue, but one issue could or would still be to me the animal shelter, okay? A solution in which it just shows the arrogance of the political class that you come up with a solution that ends up costing at least 2.5 more for the taxpayers, 2.5 times more, and you claim victory.
Do you know what I think the problem is?
It's so ridiculous.
Do you know what makes me just, what do they say, grind my gears or whatever? How much money did they pay for that transportation center? I think it was like $4.4 million. It has
Are you talking in Cincinnati?
Clermont County, heated bays for vehicles, and yet they did not have enough money to address housing at all in the last 10 years.
They're not going to get me on a whataboutism thing.
No,
if we want to analyze whether the transportation center was a good or bad investment or necessary or unnecessary, that's something I'd be fine to analyze, okay? If we want to immediately start with an argument that it was money that should have been spent on something else, maybe that's the case. I'm not saying it's not the case, but my point is I would want to analyze just that, okay? Did we spend a bunch of money on something that we don't really need, okay? And then where the money that we spent should have gone, that's a different discussion. That's a different analysis.
So here's the thing. If our elected officials, let's say Bonnie, Claire, and David, if they are to learn whether or not the tasks they are completing are what we want them to do, they need to talk to us. Not reporters, us, the people.
Let me close.
The people.
I gotta go.
But
you gotta go. We gotta go. Okay.
Hold on. They refuse to have meetings when the people can attend.
He, she, it's gotta go. Okay. And
what did you say? He, she.
He, she. I said I gotta go. You gotta go. We gotta go. He, she, it's gotta go.
Okay?
So the one of the things that I would ask you is, can you go back, because you probably have more context than I do,
I doubt
and
it.
ask Patty Lawrence why she won't do an interview.
Nope.
I'm
not going to do that.
Why not?
Because I came here to speak on behalf of myself. You did not ask me my opinion of the current Democratic Party or anything like that, but I don't want to blur that line.
What's your opinion of the current Democratic
Party? I'm not going to talk about that right now. You said you got to go.
So here's the funny thing. Here's the funny thing. Everybody knows my opinion.
I will tell you this. It's a longer conversation than this period of time. However, my concerns with the major political parties are very similar to a lot of the issues we talked about right here regarding elected officials.
Let me tell you the difference, okay? And had you been a journalist and you said to me, would you go tell David Painter, who doesn't like me, that he should do an interview with me? I would have said absolutely. Because it would be based on that I have access. I might have access.
I don't.
And David Painter doesn't like me, but I have more access to him than you do.
I don't have unique access. I don't have any better access to Patty Lawrence.
My point is that I just don't get, it starts, I don't really understand Patty Lawrence and the Democrats. It's a different discussion. But because they don't even, I would love you to go try to figure out, why don't they even run candidates? You ran, but we have 9 judges in Clermont County, none of which has ever had an opponent in a primary or a general election in their current judicial rule. How can that happen? Why don't the Democrats even run candidates?
That also is a longer discussion than we have the time allotted for right here, but I will tell you, a lot of candidates don't run because they don't think they'll win, so what's the point?
Well, sorry, you get on a
And
baseball
then
team.
we get into this system
I'll tell you,
where there's nobody holding anybody accountable. So I ran knowing I probably would not win.
My kids, I could have told you weren't going to win, but
you probably did tell me that. That wasn't why I ran.
My kid had a who just got married, was on a basketball team,
right?
And the basketball team lost every game, and we knew before they even started playing the game they were going to lose the game. But if you have a basketball team, it's like having a political party. Even when you know you're going to lose, there should be somebody on the board. Somebody's got to show up for the game. I don't understand the idea of a political party that doesn't even run people. You just have to get, you just have to get so many signatures. It's not that hard. And even if you said, well, if you said I'm not going to win, then don't spend much money, but at least there's a name. So.
Hello. Look at that.
Oh, it's Bonnie Batchelor.
The award-winning Bonnie Batchelor. Congratulations, by the way.
I had no idea that was coming. If you saw, they said if you'd have seen the shock on your face.
Oh, I saw it. That was priceless. Senator Husted's one of his staffers came down to give her an award for being an
We're going to wrap up. Bonnie Batchelor just walked by. Thank you for taking the time with me. We were pretty organized during the whole thing and got to shovel it at the end. But hopefully it's a long thing. I'll put the whole thing out there except where the camera went goofy.
I think it's important.
And hopefully it'll be useful to somebody to watch it. And
I think you have.
And so I would ask you to, reconsider. You've already given me an answer, so I'm not asking you. Is putting some press on why won't people sit for interviews? If Patty Lawrence, not you, okay? If Patty Lawrence is going to be, let's say, I would think she would be of the ilk that our elected officials should be more available. They should do interviews. They should do this. Well, then wouldn't her best approach be to show that she's going to live that?
I am not going to speak to that.
Okay?
I'm not going to speak for her.
You've seen from me from here. It's funny. Yeah. People can go watch any interview I've done. Okay, it's not that many. I think I have my opinion. I talk a lot. My wife tells me quit talking. But I don't think I'm like insulting. I'm not I'm not like I'm not looking to start an argument in our discussion.
That is correct.
I'm not looking to demonize you or that kind of thing.
Your question's not so objective.
And so
but that's all right.
I think my questions are fair. Okay.
I didn't say they weren't fair.
So any event, thank you for taking the time. And I'm going to go to a meeting.
With this. I would invite you every Friday, and anybody watching, every Friday, a group of us trying to build community. It's a nonpartisan group trying to build community. Meet on Fridays, every Friday at 4 p.m. It's called Brewing Change. Just trying to make our county as strong as possible. We meet over at
send me the information on it. I gave you my card.
4 p.m. Friday.
I'm not going to remember. I'm going to another meeting. Send me the information.
Remember,
okay?
Because it's on video.
All right. Thank you.
Captured on video.
Thank you. We won't shake, but we'll fist bump.
There you go.